This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot and Phil, Yankee Gunner. Hello, everybody. Hello, patrons. That sound you hear is not, oh my God, it's Clive. It's, oh my God, it's Phil. Hello, Phil.
That's a zoom and a half. I'm just very sorry that this is a video podcast because I've been sick the last few days and now people are going to have to look at this.
What's my excuse?
No. You're in a pretty cold place. So you can,
it's
you're sick
Fahrenheit.
as well, right?
It's Fahrenheit. It is 6 below zero, which I think is 1,000 below zero Celsius. By the way, I'm going for the U, man. I get a haircut usually every 3-4 weeks. I'm on like month 3 at this point. I just mush it into a shape at the top of my head. I'm feeling the Phil Costa vibes. Let me.
I'm saving. You know what I'm doing? I'm saving the trim for Girona because there's potentially a chance that I could be there at the game at the end of January.
He wants those Michelin star meals, baby. That's what it's all about.
That trip's not going to pay for itself, you know. So
sure isn't. But the scouting video, that's what we're here for, Phil. I will just, we're going to look at Martin Zubimendi and Dusan Vlahovic today. Zubimendi, because we've been linked by Ornstein, among others. I think Sam Muckbell actually went first with the news that we are basically advanced in getting it done for the summer. And then Dusan Vlahovic in the wake of Kolomuani looking pretty close to Juve. And we know that things with Vlahovic aren't great at Juve and there's wage issues there and they may just want him off, whether we can do it as a loan, which is sort of reportedly, I think what Ornstein said, that we would look at a foreign loan. It has to be a foreign loan because we're at our max for domestic loans. You know what they say about championship teams. They're always chock-a-block of loan players. That's been the traditional path to success. But so that's why we're going to look at them real quick on a serious note. Obviously, the Jesus news, I don't think we have to go deep because everybody kind of thought this was the news. But now that it's confirmed, it just emphasizes the urgency. Jesus and ACL. And whether you've been frustrated by him or not, I just feel this is a player who got his big move, got to play striker, got to look like the star, wanted so badly to be the guy for Brazil, did his knee for Brazil, came back too soon, couldn't get fit, started to look like Jesus, I think a little bit in just a few glimpses of quality in the last few weeks, does his ACL again, and now season, career, it's all looking pretty murky at this point.
Yeah, just it's a disaster on every level. First of all, I just feel gutted for him because he's been through a lot with injury. He's moved down the pecking order considerably at Arsenal, having come in and changed our world, as Mikel Arteta said at the time. But also on a wider level for us, it's just another disaster, another injury in the forward line. We're short on options already. Now this is another one we're short of, and he's not just a centre forward. He's someone who can play across all 3 positions in the front line as well. So we were already short. Now we're even shorter. Jesus is going to have to find himself in a very difficult position coming back mentally from this as well as physically. I'm just really sad at how his Arsenal career has turned out. And if you asked me after those first 3 months where you would have seen him at this point, I could never have guessed we'd be here. So just a lot of regret about how most of his Arsenal career has panned out.
Yeah, I feel the same. I don't think there's much to say other than I feel for him. I wish him the best in his recovery, but now short-term and long-term, you can just see a striker becomes a need, not just a wide forward, which I think is also a need. I think an elite wide forward, maybe a replacement at minimum for the squad role of Leo Trossard going forward, but maybe depending on where you think Martinelli's ceiling is, maybe a proper, true, take the game by storm kind of left winger. But we need a striker because Kai Havertz now is the only recognized striker at the club. And he wasn't even bought to be that. So we are a club that now has no recognized striker. Now, just to be clear, a lot of clubs have gone for recognized strikers and struck out. And you could argue that what's made Arsenal successful is we bought a lot of very talented players who are versatile and found the way to get the most out of their talent, right? We've got players who can play multiple roles, and we are discovering that actually just amassing talent works. Ben White came in as center back, became a great right back. Timber plays off both sides. Declan Rice, he started his career at center back. He can play 6, he can play 8. Bukayo Saka can play everywhere, obviously. Kai was brought to be an 8. He thrived at center forward, at least for a time. So I do think that rather than nailing your colors to the mast on a player that does one thing and one thing only, you can just go get elite talent that's available in the market and find a way to assemble that talent into a shape that works. And we've been good at that. So I don't want to say like, we got to go get our stick on 9. As Clive would say, someone who heads away airplanes in both boxes. I guess you don't want to head them away in the attacking box. You want to head them into the net. Can you head an airplane into a net? Anyway. So I think there's a couple sides to it, but Phil, we will get to Vlahovic in a minute. And I'll just start with him since we're talking about Jesus, even though he's who we're going to look at second. I think Arsenal are in a weird spot because I don't want to wreck our project by going for a player that I don't think long-term contributes to us winning the big trophies. I have said repeatedly that I think just from a numbers standpoint and from the standpoint that there is still a season worth trying to salvage. We are second in the Premier League. If we somehow beat Spurs and somehow Forest beat Liverpool today, as we record this, we could be 3 points back. Granted, there's a game in hand there, but you can't throw that away. And we are going to be into the last 16 of the Champions League. You can't throw that away. Absent an attacker signing, it feels like chucking the season. So would you do whatever is available with the recognition that it might just click and salvage something? And would a loan for Vlahovic be maybe that thing?
I'd definitely be more comfortable doing a loan for Vlahovic than signing him outright. I think there are still some question marks over him. Honestly, it's such a weird. We're operating in such a difficult striker market now because beyond the obvious options, I think of Haaland, Kane, Lewandowski, maybe Alexander Isak falls into this category as well. They're the certs, right? They're the ones that you'd be happy dropping the big bucks on. Obviously now Lewandowski's kind of old, Kane obviously getting there as well. But there's a real shortage of top quality strikers at the highest level. And I completely understand why there would be concerns about dropping big bucks on other options. Even someone like Gyökeres, who has been banging in goals for about 18 months now, and he's someone that I like a lot. I can see why clubs would still be hesitating to bring him in or drop 80 to 100 million on him. And I think Vlahovic falls into that bracket as well, whether it's, he's scored plenty of goals, but you still hover over the big red button, don't you, when it comes to signing him for a number of reasons. He's someone who catches your eye. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful, got a brilliant left foot. And we've been interested in the past as well. So you'd say, well, it's not out of the ordinary to be interested again.
Right.
But yeah, I just feel a bit more comfortable with a try before you buy kind of thing. Because I think always the fans of the other club tell you a lot. And it's I don't see much complaining from Juve fans at the moment. So I'm always a bit hesitant when it comes to that.
One man's trash can be another man's treasure. We have succeeded through that approach before, but one man's trash can also be another man's trash. So you just have to be thoughtful about that. One reason players move between big clubs is for one reason or another, they are surplus to requirements or not getting it done at one big club, and another big club wants to gamble on their talent. I mean, Thierry Henry comes to mind. Vlahovic is going to be Thierry Henry, but these deals should not be determined based on the fact that a club is willing to let them go. I hear things all the time like, if he was so good, such and such club wouldn't want to let him go. That's just not how any of this works, right? I mean, there are players that move and are excellent at other clubs, both between big clubs and small clubs and big clubs and big clubs. No transfer is a guarantee, but I wouldn't use that as the driver of analysis. I think this is one where we're just going to have to look at the video. We scouted him 3 years ago. I wouldn't say that I was blown away by it at that time, but we were looking at clips and some of that stuff when we did the original scouting video where he was 20, so we're talking about, because we had gone back a bit. I will say the Dusan Vlahovic video that I have currently is about 15 minutes of playtime. So we'll see what we have with that. We've got about 45 minutes on Zubimendi. We won't watch all of that. The way I look at it with Vlahovic is very simple. The club must bring in an attacker, and a loan is actually ideal if it means we don't wind up buying someone that wasn't in the plan. If someone that was in the plan can be bought in January, for me, that is the best outcome. The second best outcome is a dry loan for a player that is available, and you just see what it can be. And I think, with a guy like Vlahovic, we know we're very good. We are a very good team. Maybe Vlahovic isn't the guy that wins you the Champions League, but maybe Vlahovic is a guy who can play against the bottom half, and can get the job done at that level. Maybe he's not at the super elite level and he can't be the guy who carries us to a Champions League. But as we saw with Kai from January to May, sometimes things click and a player gets hot for a while too. When the Zubimendi news broke, there was a lot of joy. And I didn't connect to it. Not because I don't rate Zubimendi, but because my headspace is, dear God, if we don't get an attacker now, our season could go down the toilet. And we're being handed, here's a functional 6 for the summer who could be your party replacement. And like, that's a need and we need it. And I'm glad we have a plan for it. I just wasn't in a headspace to be invested in that just yet. But if I allow myself to be invested in it, I acknowledge that a big, big step for this club is Partey and Jorginho out and the next guy in. And this certainly on the surface feels like that. I have to ask you honestly, I think you're probably excited about this. What percentage of your excitement is purely so you can tweet Liverpool in the mud?
There's one particular person I'd like to direct my attention towards, and it rhymes with Ram Gugwire. Yeah, I'm obviously that's nice, but also there are 9 points ahead of us potentially by the end of today. So I don't think there's a huge amount of Zubimendi stuff that they'll be too upset about. But I think it's perfectly good news for Arsenal, and we can be happy about it because a lot of the transfer focus has been centered around attackers, and rightly so, because we have neglected that area throughout Arteta's tenure. But a midfield rebuild was sneaking up on us, and with Jorginho, and hopefully Partey.
I was like, I don't have scouting
club.
video for Giorgio. Who is he?
Honestly,
what do we know about?
the brain fog is hitting. Jorginho and Partey leaving this summer. I think we needed a midfielder, and we've probably bought the best 6 on the market, or are about to, or trying to at least. I don't think the club would be briefing all this stuff without them being pretty confident. So it feels very Declan Rice-y in how that move started to materialize in January as well. Last, what was it, 2 years back now?
Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to throw some data up on the screen first. And I want to be clear, and I'm curious. I say I want to be clear. I want to get your opinion on this too. I am of the opinion that data for central midfielders is mixed at best in terms of what it can really tell you. And that's why we're going to be looking at him. But I think the data is part of the picture. It can at least maybe tell you stylistically what a player is. There's also much more advanced data that's out there that's not available to the public. For example, StatsBomb has stuff like that and things like that. And we hope to get access back to that soon, by the way. But so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen. But in terms of style and kind of player that you expect us to be seeing when we pop up the video, give me your sort of quick overview.
He's a number 6. I mean, Zubimendi is a number 6, despite the occasional burst forward. He's a very metronomic player. He likes to be a reference point either between sort of midfield and defense. He'll drop in if he needs to. He can support players a bit further up if he needs to, but he's a guy that will be popping it around, 1 touch, 2 touch. He can evade pressure if he needs to. There won't be any huge focus on progression when it comes to him. He can be adventurous when he needs to be. Those little Jorginho passes over the top that we see so often, the kind of the first time ones, he likes those around the corner. And he can contribute further forward, but for me, his value is about being that tempo setter in the middle of the park. He's always welcome to drop in and take the ball forward from there. He's just someone who likes the ball, which led me to kind of think about what the future holds for Rice, actually, as well, because a lot of people will see his future as the 6, but I guess with Zubimendi potentially coming in, that leads to some more questions about him longer term. Are we maybe setting towards a double pivot? Which I would really like personally, considering both of their skill sets. I think they could complement each other really nicely. But yeah, I would say think of Jorginho. Zubimendi's a really nice mold or blueprint for him to be following there.
It's interesting because if you overlay Partey's data with Zubimendi's data, you get 2 players that wind up looking quite similar, at least at this stage of Partey's career. But what I will say, Phil, that worries me only slightly within the data, when I think of Jorginho or prime Partey or prime Jorginho, their USP was progressive passing. These are 9, 10, 11 progressive passes per 90 guys. These are final third entry guys. when you say a tempo setter who doesn't progress the ball, the dark side of my brain, which is a part of my brain, the part where the whiskers live, here's Mohamed El Neni. So explain to me how a guy who plays a decent number of passes, a decent completion percentage, but isn't elite in progressing the ball is still someone who's maybe don't think El Neni, think Party Jorginho, because Party Jorginho is what we need to replace. We've seen when we don't have them, sometimes ball progression is a problem. If you're talking to me about a tempo setter who's functional and doesn't progress the ball, I worry then, to your point, like what is the ball progression plan? So talk me off the El Neni viewpoint of what you've described.
Yeah, just because progressive passes maybe aren't his USP, it doesn't mean he doesn't do them at all. I think he's playing a very specific role for Real Sociedad at the moment, who, don't forget, have struggled a lot this season. This isn't the kind of the top 6, top 4 team we've seen in recent seasons. They've been a bit of a disaster. And they've lost players. Obviously, they lost a big one in Mikel Merino, your favorite at the moment. So there's been a lot of change happening on and off the pitch, but in general, they're quite a vertical team. So there can be some passes that are played forward quickly. They like to get their wingers in behind, whether it's Oyarzabal, Kubo. They like to be in and quickly down the wings. But again, he's someone who will just kind of float around over to the left to come and facilitate play, over to the right to come and facilitate play. He'll drop in to kind of get the ball moving and rolling again. He's not going to be a guy who is going to play those De Bruyne-esque defense splitting passes. And I think in terms of Partey, he wasn't really playing like we know him at Atletico Madrid. He was very much a defensive screen. His ability in possession was not always being utilized to the maximum, I would say. But again, that was down to playing style. So maybe in another team, in another environment, we could see a bit more from him. But just how he's being used at the moment for Real Sociedad, he's a much more facilitative player. He's a metronome. He's someone who he's kind of greasing everything together. Whether that's something that you'd want or what other people want, I don't know. But in terms of pure profile, him coming in, I could see him slotting in very easily. And I think Jorginho is actually a really nice comparison because a lot of his defensive work is similar to that of Jorginho as well. The way he kind of reads play, nips in, hasn't got a huge amount of physicality, but if you could watch him, he can move. So
yeah.
I think some players just don't show up well on Who Scored or FBref or whatever. He's probably one of them. But if you watch him, you can see his impact on the game and sort of the zones he picks up. I mean, just look at the Euro final. He came on at halftime replacing Rodri, and he was excellent. So it's not always something you can see on the green bars, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I will say, similar to Merino, you see a staggeringly consistent set of data, though, across years in terms of he's going to complete 85% of his passes. He's going to play 60 passes per 90. He's going to make 5.5 or 6 progressive passes a game. He's going to have 5 final third entries a game. That's been who he is, much in the same way Merino was a 75% passer every season, and here's what he's going to do. Now, you could say, well, when they change system and different team, things are going to change. Merino, his data at Arsenal looks a lot like his data at Sociedad. Declan Rice's data at Arsenal looks a lot like Declan Rice's data at West Ham. So, it's hard to say. Some players do transform. Some players just are those players. Last point here before we bring the video up. What do you say? So one thing I will say, Liverpool want him, Barcelona want him. I think when clubs of that profile that I think are pretty smart at scouting and understand what they're doing, Barca have a lot of problems, but finding talent isn't among them. I think that there's something there, and certainly it will be a coup if we're able to beat those clubs to this signing, certainly. And I think another reminder that we have pull, as the kids say, right? That people want to come play for Mikel Arteta. And I think it helps us form a group. Instead of thinking of he's our 6, you have Rice, you have Zubi, you have Merino, you have Odegaard, you have Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly, who absolutely should be considered as moving into a midfield cluster as they go from being 17, 18 to 19, 20, 21, ages where you really expect to see them take even bigger strides. And Kai, we know will play in there. So it's a group. And I don't think you have to look at it as Marino's the stick on 6 now and Rice is the stick on 8, and Odegaard's the other stick on 8, and that's that. So it's fine. But there will be some people that say, here's another guy similar to Marino. He's 26. He's in his prime. He's been at Sociedad for a long, long time. He's a player that's known, why hasn't he moved sooner? Well, in Marino's case, to be fair, he had gone to Newcastle. He'd impressed there, and then he had a clause that let him go back to Sociedad. Is it just that players don't necessarily like to leave the region, like to leave these clubs? They get comfortable. It's hard to pry them loose.
There is definitely an element of that, and I think it's not uncommon, not just in the Basque region, but across Spain in general. I think we've seen countless sort of examples of where players go back home. I think of clubs like Sevilla who have had that experience with Jose Antonio Reyes, Jesus Navas. There is a very strong family vibe to a lot of these clubs, especially if they've spent all of their youth development there. And I think he's felt a weight of responsibility to play for Real Sociedad, to play well, to kind of take them to trophies in European football. But he needs to think about himself now and his career. He's been courted by many a club: Barcelona, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal. Obviously, it's kind of his time now. And I think he saw Marino move on last year and probably thinks, I want a taste of that as well. But
do you think
I think it's
linked?
nice.
Could there be a link there? Hey, we get Marino this year.
Maybe.
Marino talks to Zubi. I like it here. You're gonna, it makes Zubimendi feel more comfortable. He knows Odegaard a bit. Like, is there some of that? Do you think there can be a bit of groundwork in that way?
It can't hurt. I think most of the groundwork would have been done by Mikel, who's obviously playing in a very similar position at Arsenal, when he dropped a bit deeper in his older kind of age. And also they're from the same region, I think same city they grew up, and they played for the same boyhood club. So this is no coincidence, I'll say. I think a lot of groundwork has been put into this guy for many a year now. And I think conversations between us and Real Sociedad, whether it's for Kieran Tierney, whether it's for Marino, whether it's being linked to Olave as the director of football, there's a relationship there. And I think it's certainly no coincidence that these have come out now.